Please, you must read this.
The old man didn't ask for money. He didn't beg. He simply stretched out a rain-soaked envelope toward Adrian Sterling and said, "Please, before you walk away, read this. If you don't, you'll spend the rest of your life missing the only truth that ever mattered." Adrian didn't even slow down. "Move him back," he told his security team without turning his head. One guard gently but firmly guided the old man away from the entrance of the Grand Westbridge Hotel while cameras continued flashing around the billionaire everyone called the city's greatest philanthropist. The envelope slipped from the old man's trembling hand, landed beneath the rear tire of Adrian's limousine, and disappeared into the shadows. The old man didn't chase it. Instead, he lowered his eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry, Noah. I tried." Those words vanished beneath the roar of the engine as the limousine pulled away. If that single sentence already has you wondering who Noah was and why one forgotten letter could change everything, let everyone know in the comments where you're watching from. This story only grows more unbelievable from here. Inside the limousine, Adrian loosened his tie and stared through the rain-covered window. The city celebrated him tonight. Another award sat beside him on the leather seat, engraved with the words Lifetime Humanitarian Excellence. It joined dozens of others waiting inside his penthouse, each one celebrating the fortune he had donated to hospitals, schools, and charities across the country. His assistant, Claire Bennett, glanced at him from the opposite seat. "You barely smiled all evening." "I smiled enough. They asked how you stay so compassionate. And I answered. You answered perfectly. That's what they invited me to do." Claire sighed. She had worked beside Adrian for almost 12 years. She knew the difference between the generous man people saw and the emotionally distant man who lived behind the headlines. Adrian funded causes with astonishing precision. He reviewed spreadsheets that determined which organizations deserved millions. Yet if a stranger stepped directly into his path, something inside him closed like a locked vault. As the limousine rolled through the sleeping city, the driver suddenly frowned. "Sir? What is it?" "I thought I ran over something. It was probably trash." The driver nodded and continued. Neither man realized the envelope had become lodged beneath the chassis. Across town, the old man walked alone beneath broken streetlights. Rain soaked his coat until it clung to his thin frame, but he refused to stop. Every few minutes he reached into his pocket before remembering it was empty. The letter was gone. "So that's it," he whispered to himself. "Maybe I wasn't meant to finish the promise." He reached a small shelter where volunteers served hot soup to anyone willing to stand in line. A young volunteer smiled. "Sir, would you like an extra blanket tonight?" "No, thank you. You'll freeze out there. Someone else needs it more." The volunteer watched him walk away carrying nothing except an old leather journal held tightly against his chest. The journal mattered more than food, more than warmth, more than sleep. The next morning Adrian's schedule began at 6 sharp. 2 investor meetings, 1 interview, a foundation board review, lunch with the mayor, then a flight to New York before sunset. His life operated with mechanical precision. Nothing unexpected ever lasted. Until his chauffeur noticed something while washing the limousine. "Mr. Sterling?" Adrian looked up from his tablet. "Yes." There was an envelope stuck underneath the car. "So, I figured it belonged to someone from last night." Claire recognized it immediately. The old gentleman. Adrian barely glanced at it. "Leave it on my desk." "Should I throw it away?" "If nobody claims it by next week." Claire hesitated. He seemed desperate. "So do hundreds of people every week." But he wasn't asking for money. That doesn't change anything. She picked up the envelope herself. It was old, carefully sealed, and addressed only with 2 handwritten words. For Adrian. No last name. No return address. No stamp. Just those 2 words. She placed it neatly beside Adrian's computer. It remained unopened. Hours passed. Meetings came and went. Billions of dollars changed direction through boardroom decisions. The envelope never moved. Late that afternoon, Adrian stood before executives discussing a merger worth nearly $4 billion when his phone buzzed. Claire rarely interrupted meetings. He answered. What happened? I think you should know something. Can it wait? I don't think so. What is it? The old man from last night? Adrian frowned. What about him? We can't find him. What do you mean? He disappeared. Adrian stared across the conference table. So, security reviewed the cameras because one reporter asked whether anyone identified him. And? He walked away from the hotel. Obviously. But after turning the corner, Claire's voice became quieter. He was never seen again. Silence settled over the room. One executive cleared his throat. Should we continue? Adrian looked back at the presentation. Yes. But for the first time all day, he wasn't listening. That evening Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She replayed the security footage herself. The old man walked away calmly. He crossed the street, passed a bookstore, turned one corner, and simply never appeared again. No alley, no taxi, no bus, no second cam, nothing. It was as though the city had swallowed him whole. She called the investigator employed by Adrian's foundation. I need a favor. Personal or business? I'm not sure. She emailed the photograph taken from the hotel's security camera. Find this man. Who is he? I wish I knew. The investigator called back less than 2 hours later. You won't like this. You already found him? I found something stranger. What? I've run his face through every database I have access to. And? No driver's license. No passport. No criminal record. No employment history. No medical files. Claire frowned. That's impossible. I thought so too. So who is he? I honestly don't know. Meanwhile, miles outside the city, the old man sat alone inside an abandoned railway station where only freight trains still passed. He carefully opened his leather journal. Inside were faded photographs, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and one empty space where the missing letter had once rested. He touched the empty page. I failed you. A gentle voice interrupted him. No. He looked up. An elderly woman carrying groceries stood nearby. You didn't fail. You don't understand. I think I do. She handed him a small paper bag. Eat something. I'm not hungry. Liar. A tiny smile crossed his face. You always could tell. She sat beside him. Did he read it? No. Will he? I don't know anymore. She looked toward the distant skyline where Adrian's towers rose above every other building. Maybe people only hear the truth after life becomes loud enough to silence everything else. The old man stared at the journal. I hope you're right. Back in Westbridge, Adrian finally returned home close to midnight. The city glittered beneath his penthouse windows, but something unusual caught his attention. The envelope. It was no longer on his desk. He pressed the intercom. Claire? Yes. Did you move that letter? No. The cleaning staff? I already asked. No one touched it. Adrian searched the office himself. Nothing. Then, just as he was about to give up, he noticed something lying beneath the bookshelf. The envelope had somehow slid across the room on its own. He picked it up. For the first time, he turned it over in his hands. It felt strangely heavy. Not because of what was inside, but because, for reasons he couldn't explain, his hands had started to shake. Just as his thumb slipped beneath the seal, his phone rang. Claire's voice was breathless. Adrian, don't open that letter yet. He froze. What happened? The investigator called again. And? This isn't just about the old man anymore. Her next words made the color drain from Adrian's face. The photograph we sent out, someone identified the child standing beside you in an old picture from 35 years ago. Adrian's heartbeat stopped for a moment. What child? Adrian gripped the envelope so tightly the edges bent beneath his fingers. What child? He repeated, his voice lower this time. Claire hesitated just long enough to make the silence unbearable. The investigator said the photograph inside your letter matches one kept in the archives of St. Matthew's Elementary School. It was taken during a summer field trip 35 years ago. Adrian frowned. That's impossible. I haven't opened the envelope. I know. That's why I'm asking you not to. Come to the office first. Claire, you're making no sense. I wish I were. The call ended before Adrian could ask another question. For the first time in years, he cancelled every appointment the following morning. At dawn, his black sedan rolled into the underground garage beneath Sterling Dynamics. Claire was already waiting beside the elevator, holding a worn cardboard file. You look like you didn't sleep, Adrian said. I didn't. She handed him the file without speaking. Inside was a faded class photograph. Dozens of smiling children stood in neat rows beneath an oak tree. One boy was unmistakably Adrian at 10 years old. Standing beside him was another child with messy dark hair and an oversized denim jacket. One arm rested casually across Adrian's shoulder as if they had been inseparable. Adrian stared at the picture. I don't remember him. Claire looked directly into his eyes. That's the problem. The investigator entered the conference room moments later. His name was Victor Hale, a former detective who had spent 20 years finding people who didn't want to be found. I've checked every public record, Victor began. The boy's name? Noah Mercer. Adrian repeated it quietly. Noah. The strange part isn't who he was. Victor slid another document across the table. It's who remembers him. The paper listed only 3 living people connected to Noah. An elderly schoolteacher. A retired librarian. Elias Rowan. The old man, Adrian whispered. Victor nodded. He wasn't following you for money. Then why? I haven't figured that out. Claire leaned forward. What about Noah? Victor exhaled. It's as if someone erased him. What do you mean? There are school records until he was 11. And then? Nothing. No graduation. No medical history. No employment. No death certificate. No marriage. No address. No trace. Adrian slowly sat back. People don't just disappear. Victor looked at him carefully. Most don't. The room fell silent. Then Adrian looked at the unopened envelope still resting on the table. This ends now. He slid one finger beneath the seal. Claire instinctively reached out. Wait. Why? If someone spent decades trying to get this into your hands, opening it changes everything. It already has. He broke the seal. Inside was no stack of papers. No long explanation. Only 3 things. A faded photograph. A brass key. And one handwritten sentence. You remembered the awards. Now remember the promise. Adrian read it twice. Then a third time. What promise? Neither Claire nor Victor answered. Because neither of them knew. Victor picked up the brass key. There are initials engraved here. He turned it toward the light. Noah Mercer. Adrian's pulse quickened. I've never seen that key before. Victor frowned. I think you have. What? I just don't think you remember. Hours later, they drove to St. Matthew's Elementary, now a nearly abandoned brick building scheduled for demolition. Waiting outside was 90-year-old Margaret Ellis, the retired teacher who had identified Noah. She smiled sadly the moment she saw Adrian. You have his eyes. Adrian looked confused. My eyes? She laughed softly. No, not literally. Claire stepped forward. Mrs. Ellis, we're trying to understand what happened. The old teacher nodded. I've waited a very long time for this day. She unlocked an old classroom that smelled of dust and aging books. Every desk had been removed except one. Margaret placed her hand on it. Noah always sat here. Adrian stared around the room. I don't remember any of this. You remember more than you think. She reached into a cabinet and removed an old wooden memory box. Inside were dozens of photographs, drawings, attendance sheets. One by one she spread them across the desk. Everywhere Adrian looked, there was Noah, standing beside him during science projects, laughing beside him at recess, holding the same soccer trophy, sharing birthday cake, fishing by a river, camping, building tree houses. The photographs showed years of friendship. Yet Adrian remembered absolutely none of it. His breathing became uneven. Why can't I remember him? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Because after the accident, your parents begged everyone never to mention his name again. Claire looked stunned. What accident? Margaret closed the memory box. I promised I'd never tell. Victor spoke quietly. But someone already broke that promise. Margaret nodded. Yes. Elias. She smiled. He always was stubborn. Adrian stepped closer. What happened? Before Margaret could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Her face immediately turned pale. No. Claire noticed. What's wrong? Margaret slowly lowered the phone. They've started clearing Noah's old house this morning. Victor frowned. Why? The city finally approved demolition. Adrian looked confused. So? Margaret met his eyes. If there's anything left inside that house, it'll be gone before sunset. Without another word, Adrian turned toward the door. Let's go. The drive took less than 20 minutes. Heavy machinery already surrounded the weathered house at the edge of town. Construction crews prepared to begin. An orange excavator idled only yards away. Adrian hurried toward the foreman. Stop the demolition. We've got permits. I'll pay whatever delay costs. It's not about money. Victor flashed his investigator credentials. We need 1 hour. The foreman reluctantly checked his watch. You've got 45 minutes. Adrian pushed open the front door. Dust covered everything. Furniture remained exactly where it had been abandoned years earlier. Time itself seemed frozen. Claire whispered, it's like someone expected to come back. Adrian wandered through the narrow hallway until he reached a child's bedroom. On the wall, 2 names had been carved into the wood. Adrian, Noah, connected by a crooked arrow. His hand instinctively touched the carving. Suddenly, the flash. Cold water. Children screaming. Someone shouting, take my hand. Adrian staggered backward. Claire caught him. What happened? He grabbed his head. I heard someone's voice. Victor entered carrying a rusted metal box. It was hidden beneath the floorboards. The brass key fit perfectly. Inside lay newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, dozens of photographs, and 1 cassette tape labeled simply, for Adrian. No date. No explanation. Claire looked at him. You should hear it. Adrian picked up the cassette with trembling hands. For 35 years, no one had listened to it. If you were standing where Adrian is now, would you press play immediately, or would you be afraid of what you might hear? Tell us in the comments, because this next choice changes everything. Victor searched the room. There has to be a tape player. He opened another cabinet. Nothing. Claire checked the shelves. Empty. Then the foreman shouted from outside. 5 minutes. That's all I've got left. Victor looked around frantically. No player. Adrian refused to leave. There has to be one. Just then, Margaret stepped into the doorway holding something wrapped in an old towel. I thought you might need this. She carefully unfolded it. A dusty portable cassette recorder. It hasn't been used in decades. Adrian slowly inserted the tape. His thumb hovered over the play button. The machine clicked. Static crackled through the tiny speaker. A young boy's voice filled the silent room. Hi, Adrian. Adrian's entire body froze. The voice sounded warm, like someone speaking to his closest friend. Before another word could play, the lights suddenly went out. The recorder stopped. Outside, the excavator roared to life on its own. The entire house shook violently as the first wall began to collapse. Adrian didn't think. He moved. The moment the house shook, he grabbed the cassette player and pulled it against his chest as dust poured from the ceiling. Stop the machine! Victor shouted. Everyone rushed outside. The excavator operator jumped down, confused. I didn't touch anything. The controls locked up. But Adrian wasn't listening. He was staring at the damaged house. The place that held 35 years of forgotten memories was seconds away from being destroyed. Please, Adrian said. The foreman looked at him. I'll pay for every second of delay. Just give me 10 minutes. The foreman hesitated. Then he nodded. 10 minutes. They rushed back inside. Margaret carefully cleaned the cassette player while Adrian stood frozen beside the old wooden desk. "Who was that voice?" Claire asked softly. Adrian looked at the tape. "I don't know. But you recognized it." He swallowed. "I think I did." Victor finally got the recorder working again. The tape continued. A child's voice filled the room. "Hi, Adrian. If you're listening to this, it means something happened and I wasn't able to tell you myself." Adrian closed his eyes. 35 years disappeared. The voice continued. "I know your parents told you not to come back here. I know they told you to forget this place. But I don't want you to forget everything." The pause. Then the boy laughed quietly. "Especially not the promise." Adrian opened his eyes. The promise. The word felt familiar, like a song he had forgotten the lyrics to. The recording continued. "Adrian, you always said you wanted to be someone important someday. You said rich people were important because everyone listened to them." A small laugh came through the speaker. "But I told you something." The tape crackled. "Being important isn't about people knowing your name. It's about what you do when nobody is watching." Claire looked at Adrian. He looked away. Because those words weren't just from a childhood friend. They were from the exact person Adrian had spent his entire life trying to become. The tape continued. "That day by the river, you were scared. You thought nobody would find us." Adrian suddenly grabbed the edge of the table. The memories came rushing back. The river. The storm. The broken bridge. Noah pulling him away from the current. A young Adrian crying. "Noah, don't let go." The memory faded. His eyes filled with tears. "I remember." Everyone looked at him. Victor stepped forward. "What do you remember?" Adrian stared at the floor. "I wasn't drowning." Nobody spoke. "What?" "I thought I was." He looked toward the window. "But Noah wasn't saving me from the river." The room went silent. "He was saving me from my own fear." Margaret covered her mouth. The tape continued. "If you remember, Adrian, you'll remember what happened after." A longer pause. Then Noah's voice became quieter. "My brother Elias told me not to do this. He said your family would never understand." Adrian froze. Elias. The old man from the hotel. The stranger. The man who had spent years trying to deliver the letter. The recording continued. "But I don't want your family to feel guilty. I don't want them to pay us back." A child's voice. A child's final message. "I just want Adrian to remember that someone believed in him before he had anything." The tape clicked. Silence. Nobody moved. Then Adrian whispered, "Why did I forget him?" Margaret answered quietly, "Because your mind protected you." Adrian turned. "What does that mean?" The accident wasn't the only thing that happened that day. Victor looked confused. "What else?" Margaret sat down. "Your father arrived before the ambulance. He saw Noah injured. He saw how scared you were." She paused. "And he made a decision." "What decision?" "He decided the best way to protect you was to erase everything connected to that day." Adrian stared. "Erase?" "He moved you to another school. He paid doctors to help you deal with the trauma. He told everyone around you never to mention Noah again." Claire looked shocked. "Your parents thought they were protecting you." Adrian shook his head slowly. "They weren't protecting me." His voice cracked. "They were protecting me from feeling grateful." Nobody answered. Because they knew he was right. For decades, Adrian had built a billion-dollar empire. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten the person who taught him what success actually meant. The next morning, Adrian found Elias. Not through investigators. Not through databases. Through the one place he should have looked first. The old railway station. Elias sat on the same bench where Claire had found him. He wasn't surprised. "You finally listened." Adrian stood in front of him. For the first time in years, the billionaire had no prepared speech. No lawyer. No assistant. No cameras. Just a man facing someone who had carried a forgotten promise for decades. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elias looked down. "Tell you what?" "Everything." A faint smile crossed Elias's face. Because Noah asked me not to. Adrian's eyes narrowed. He knew. He knew your family would feel obligated. I could have helped. No. Elias looked at him. You could have paid. The words hurt because they were true. But Noah didn't want payment. Adrian sat beside him. Then what did he want? Elias opened the old leather journal. Inside was one final photograph. Noah and Adrian sitting beside the river as children. Written on the back were 7 words. Remember me. Then help someone else. Adrian stared at it. He wrote this 2 days before he passed away. The words hit harder than anything else. Adrian looked up. When did he die? Elias remained silent. How long ago? 9 years. Adrian froze. 9 years. Elias nodded. I tried finding you then. Why didn't you? Because you were already famous. He smiled sadly. Your face was everywhere. But I couldn't reach you. Why? Because every time I saw you on television, you were giving millions away. Adrian looked confused. Isn't that good? It was. Elias looked at him. But Noah wasn't asking you to give millions. The pause. He was asking you to see one person. Those words stayed with Adrian. Because suddenly he understood. He had spent years solving problems from a distance. Writing checks. Building foundations. Signing documents. But he had forgotten the one thing Noah understood at 10 years old. People weren't numbers. They were stories. They were names. They were memories. Months later, the world noticed something unusual. A new foundation appeared. Not with Adrian Sterling's name. Not with his company's logo. No press conference. No interviews. No giant announcement. Just a simple sign outside a small community center. The Noah Mercer Center. It helped families facing medical emergencies. Not because they had perfect paperwork. Not because they had impressive stories. But because they needed someone to notice. Reporters eventually discovered Adrian was behind it. They surrounded him outside the building. Mr. Sterling, why didn't you put your own name on the foundation? Adrian looked toward the center doors. Then he answered, because the person who taught me the most never wanted recognition. A reporter asked, was this about repaying an old debt? Adrian shook his head. No. Then what was it about? He smiled slightly, remembering one. Years later, Adrian returned to the river where everything began. He carried the old photograph. The same one that had arrived inside the forgotten envelope. He placed it beside the water. Not as a goodbye. As a promise. Because the letter had never been about guilt. It had never been about money. It had been about a boy who saved another boy and never asked for anything in return. And perhaps the greatest lesson Adrian Sterling ever learned was that the most valuable people in life are not always the ones whose names appear in headlines. Thomas. They are the ones who quietly change your entire future and disappear before you even realize they were there. If this story reminded you that one small act of kindness can change a person's entire life, leave a comment sharing the kindest thing someone has ever done for you. And if you want more emotional stories about second chances, hidden sacrifices, and unexpected moments that change everything, make sure to like this video and subscribe.